Hello, welcome back. I have something to show you. Something that I finished up the other day. This is my log cabin quilt top. What do you think? I don't know how far I can back up with this, but what I did was I sewed them together, you know, straight along the path. And then I added a white border. What I plan to do is add the darker blue as the binding. I was thinking about using the medium blue as another border, sort of a pieced border. And then I thought, no, I just really like the simplicity of it. So you can see the white against the dark blue over on this side. Here it floats against the other white. So I'm pretty pleased at how it turned out. I've said I don't think I'm very good at log cabins, but you know, I don't think you can notice all of my mistakes. All those times when I kind of veered off course and had to square up the pieces, you know, maybe a little more aggressively than I would have wanted to, but it all came out all right in the end. And what I did was I just sewed block to block. I sewed the first two blocks together and then the second two blocks together, and then, you know, these last two blocks together. Then I sewed the first two to the next two and on like that, and then sewed the rows. And you know, it worked out pretty well. So I'm happy with the way this turned out. I've pressed it. I've just got it kind of draped over a railing at the moment. I'm not going to quilt it immediately. It's got to take its place in the queue, you know. So I'm awfully glad to have the sewing done, and as you can see, I've got my table back. Yay! I've got my table back. I love the sewing. I love having everything in this one room. But I also don't really like clutter. It really kind of bothers me. I was working on a knitting project. I made a pair of socks. So if anybody is interested in learning how to knit a pair of socks, head over there. So I had my socks going. I had my Afghan blocks going. I was designing a different knitting project that I'm waiting for the yarn for. I had this quilt that was being sewn on the table, and then I was also quilting, and it was almost too much. It was almost too much. So I've got the socks done. I've got the quilt top done, and we're gonna try to slow down a little bit. I can't create a quilt and a sweater and a stitching piece every week, you know, and I don't think anybody expects me to. So you're just gonna have to go at my own pace, because sometimes we need a little bit of a break. But I also wanted to show you, this is one of my first log cabins. Let's see if I can hold that up a little bit so you can see. And this one, I made this one for my son when he was little. He came with me to Joann Fabrics. He sat in the cart, and I said, pick out some fabrics. And this is what he picked out. He picked out these sort of in a pinwheel configuration, I guess. He picked out greens, and he picked out these blues, sort of a blues with a purple tint. And it looks like what I did was I just kept the two sides of each color consistent. These two blues look different, but I think they were on the same fabric. It just was a graduated kind of fabric. So you got, you know, you got an assortment. If you can see this one, you can see that the blues were definitely the same fabric. You just sometimes got different pieces of it. And from the back, you can see how I quilted it. Maybe you can see how I quilted it. Another hand quilted one. Look at how much it's faded over the years, though. It's It probably was draped over, in the sunshine, and he doesn't care. I don't care. Now, for any of you mothers out there or grandmothers, what I did was I had this on his bed. This was his big bed. This was when he turned about 4, and he had a big bed. And I don't know how many quilt blocks I took, but I took some of the quilt blocks and I made a pillow sham out of the quilt blocks. And I had one area that was, must have been the green area, or maybe what I did was I placed, because I don't have this anymore, and I don't even know if I have any pictures of it, but I placed, maybe it was on a white fabric, and I sewed some of the quilt blocks, but I had an area that was free, and what I did was I stenciled his name in fabric paints. I stenciled his name on it, and it kind of brought it all together. This was made for you, this is yours. It was nice. I liked it at the time. And of course, I still have the quilt. Happy memories attached to it. So those are my 2 log cabins, and I like them both. They've both got different feels to them. And like I said, this blue one, I'm going to quilt it in the ditch. So I'm not sure which ditches I'm going to choose first, or how many I'm going to do. And then I'm going to do something in this border, something hopefully linear. If everything is straight, I don't really want, a lot of curving lines, or maybe I do. I haven't figured that part out. But what I have figured out is I went back to quilting this lovely quilt. This is for my son's daughter, my granddaughter. So I had these middle portions quilted before. And now what I've done is I've quilted all of these straight lines so that it's more of a grid. Perhaps you'll be able to see it better on the back. Not really sure. I never really know how things are going to look until I film them, but you can see there's a grid, and then you've got the hopefully this is coming through, the grid work, and then the sort of flower in the middle. And now what I need to do are these edge triangles. And I think that what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this flower and I'm just going to do 3 of the petals. So I'm just going to do, 1 petal, 1 petal, 1 petal. And then in this outer border, if I've got half there and half there, I think I'm going to do the petals facing the other direction here. And then I'm going to connect them with a straight line in the border. So I'm going to have the half flowers that are connected with, 2 or 3 straight lines. I think it'll be fun. So this is coming right along. My fingers are very sore. Let's get a good, this you can see a little bit of the, ink that's in the marking pen. I globbed it all over with a wet towel last night. And, I never get all of it in the first go. But, those will all work out. And when this is all done, I'm going to toss it in the washing machine and fluff it all up, because I like that old, the old-fashioned look of it being very well worn and soft. And so that's going to take the rest of the marking pen out. But you can see I do pretty small stitches. Hopefully that's a good representation. And what I wanted to show you is, hang on just one sec. This is the quilt hoop that I use. It holds the quilt. Then you put the top on, you know, just like anything. And what I like to do is sort of push down just a little bit. It's not the same as counted cross stitch or embroidery or things that you want really, really tight. You want to have a little bit of room. What I do is I put my thimble on my finger and I use the rocking motion. So you're almost pushing the needle straight down, and then from underneath you can, my finger gets very sore here because you're basically stabbing your finger. And that's how you know the needle has gone all the way through all the layers. And then you bring it back up again and down and up and down and up. And I get a terrible, terribly sore finger from my thimble because I'm pushing so hard. Some of the bits, my thud, some of the parts of the quilt that you do, for instance, this middle square, there aren't any seams really that you're quilting through when you're in the middle. But when you get to these smaller squares, can you see the white showing through? You've got, you know, you've got your 1/4 inch that's under there. So sometimes you're having to go through 4 layers on the top, and then the batting, and then the back. And heaven forbid you do that where there's a seam, because I sewed 2 pieces of fabric together to get enough length for the back. So sometimes you're going through an awful lot of fabric, and there's a lot of pressure on that needle, and you can't put too much pressure on it, of course, on an angle, because the needle will just bend and it will break. So there's a fine line, you know, between getting everything synchronized, and that's what makes quilting challenging. Out here on these borders, it's smooth sailing, because unless you've sewn right here, and I do the diagonal method where you know, you kind of put your pieces like this and sew the diagonal line and then flip it out. And I do press these seams open on these just to make it flatter. Apart from that, you're only going through, you know, just the top layer and the backing. So the borders are much, much easier to stitch sometimes. And again, back to this log cabin, I've seen designs where they've got a really, really nice quilted bit in here on this white. But do you see how many seams are in there? How much you'd have to go through? So that's a job maybe for a long arm, not so much for a hand quilter. I don't know how the old girls did it in the olden days. But yeah, so those are my plans for my quilts. I've got one that's waiting until the baby quilt is done. And the baby quilt is not that far away from being done. It's just that I have a stealth knitting project that I need to get done, and as soon as the yarn arrives. And when I'm doing something for a job, I like to give it all of my attention. So I'll be pretty much straight knitting for probably a week or 10 days. But I think if I quilt on a weekend day, I think that's enough where I'll get a lot done, but I won't injure my fingers too much, and I'll still have a lot of time to do other things. So that's going to be my new schedule. We'll see how it works out, because in the past I've been known to quilt for days and days and days on end, and you do get bloody fingers, let me tell you. And if that ever happens to you and you get your own blood on your quilt, your own saliva will get it out. So you have to spit on your quilt. Water won't really do it so much, but your own saliva will neutralize your own blood. If somebody else spits on it, it's apparently not going to do anything at all. I always find that interesting. So, so that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take it easier with the sewing. I still would like to do the barn quilt, the book that came out last year. I know I've got that name wrong and I don't have the book with me at the moment, but she's got some beautiful quilts in there. And I'm not sure if I want to do the main cover quilt or if I want to do one of the smaller versions. But I've always thought that was very, very pretty. And I do have some Three Sisters fabric that I've kind of been saving for that project. So I'd like to do that. And I'd also like to do just a um, patchwork extravaganza of all of the fabrics that I've got going on in the drawer. All the old fabrics. I'd like to do something other than a 9-patch, other than a log cabin. I haven't decided what yet, but I'd like to do that sort of piecemeal so that I'm kind of working on that a little bit and maybe try to get a block of the barn quilt done maybe every week or every month. And so those are the quilting plans for now. So finish up the baby quilt, get the log cabin quilt quilted, but I can't wear myself out doing them for you as much as I would like to just get this log cabin pounded out so you can see the finished thing. I think it's going to take me a few weeks / months to get it down. So that's all I've got for you today. I hope you have enjoyed this visit with the log cabins and my technique for quilting. I'd like to have an overhead camera and show you exactly how I quilt because it's kind of becoming a lost art. So many people are doing more of the long stitches in this sashiko method and using different needles and different threads entirely. I'm kind of old-fashioned. You know, this is how the grandmothers did it in generations past, and I like the look of it. And I like the templates that you can buy, the feathers that you can quilt in there, in the borders, the flowers, the feathers, the, you know, that sort of look. The clam, is it called clam shells? I have a template, but I've actually never quilted that pattern, but I'd like to do things, I like to do things like that rather than just going in straight lines right through the middle of the fabric. So, because my thinking is you sew the quilt top so that you have something to quilt. Most people, all the effort is in the quilt top and then they say, yay, I'm done, and pass it off to the long armor. For me, it's more the sewing is the opening act. Now I can quilt it. And I've also wanted to do a whole cloth quilt. So if any of you are unfamiliar, a whole cloth quilt is basically you're just taking a whole cloth and that's your backdrop. It's all about the quilting. So all you see, generally they're white, but I have seen other colors. Sometimes the Amish, I think they did whole cloth on black. But yeah, it's just all about the quilting, and you can have so many different quilting designs going and ebbing and flowing, and I would like to do that because for me it's more about the quilting than so much the piecing. But that's all I've got for you. It was going to be a short one already. I've just talked and talked and talked and talked. So I hope to visit you again soon. I've got many more quilts in the house that I can show you, and I'll pop back in and show you any progress that I get done. And until I see you again, have a really, really great week.